No long intro. Becoming anti-fragile. Now, this is a concept I've been incorporating within my own personal trading for a while now. And like we talked about in last week's video, I want to share that with you guys. It says that what kills me makes others stronger. Now, at first glance, this may sound like a weird thing to say, but Nassim Taleb mentioned this in his book Antifragile. And let's take a look and see how we can actually use this concept to improve our trading. He says that the anti-fragility of some comes necessarily at the expense of the fragility of others. In a system, the sacrifices of some units, fragile units that is, or people, are often necessary for the well-being of other units or the whole. Now, this was very important for me to understand at that time when I was reading this book, because prior to understanding this concept, I was always in denial and I was always upset at my losing trades. But now, understanding that in a system, that the sacrifices of some of those trades, those losers, understanding that they were necessary for my well-being and my trading, for the bettering of the whole, had I understand that concept, perhaps I would have welcomed some of those losing trades. Although that may be or sound counterintuitive at first glance, but it is very helpful understanding that. And that's one of the core principles of being anti-fragile. Being able to understand that mistakes, although they may hurt, but they benefit us in the long run. Let's take a look below. It says that when you are fragile, you depend on things following the exact planned course, with as little deviation as possible, for deviations are more harmful than helpful. This is why the fragile needs to be very predictive in its approach, and conversely, predictive systems cause fragility. When you want deviations and you don't care about the possible dispersion of outcomes that the future can bring, since most will be helpful, you are anti-fragile. Now, these concepts are so powerful, and oddly enough, they make so much sense. I'm not sure because Nassim himself, he was a floor trader earlier on in his career, but while writing this book, he wasn't specifically talking about trading. It was more broad and more general. He barely even touched on trading, but a lot of his writing just worked very well when it comes to trading. I'm not sure if it's a bias because trading is all I think about. Maybe that's why I draw similarities between them. But he mentions that the fragile depend on things following the exact planned course. And now we'll actually take a look at a trade I took yesterday during London session. Because if you guys remember, I struggled a lot in London when things didn't necessarily go my way, because a lot of times the London delayed protractionary phase would show up in price action instead of what I would ideally like to see, which was if I'm bearish in the markets at 12 midnight open, I ideally like to see price rally higher. That's my ideal London protractionary phase. But sometimes it wouldn't do so. Sometimes right at New York open, midnight, it would just start to trade lower. And I would just hate to see that because I didn't necessarily understand what was happening in price. All along, it was what ICT calls the London delayed protraction. And because I depended on things following the exact planned course with little deviation, because I never wanted to see the markets go lower before heading higher, because that was my planned course. So as a result, those deviations became more harmful than helpful to me. And he mentions that This is why the fragile needs to be very predictive in its approach. And better yet, let's take a look. He says, and conversely, predictive systems cause fragility. Now, some of you may ask, well, why does predictive systems cause fragility? Well, let's put it this way. In my own personal experience, when I've seen my ideal London protractionary stage or phase, where price rallies right at midnight, and let's say it takes out previous day's high or previous week's high, and it clears buy stops, and I'm bearish on the day, and I see price takes out a short-term low, so I would probably look at that as a break in market structure, and it creates a displacement in form of a fair value gap, and that is my ideal entry. Let's say to sweeten the deal, there's relative equal lows lower, and let's say there's a liquidity void lower, so every indication is pointing at that. My prediction is right. The markets are going to go lower and take out those equal lows and fill in that BISI or something of the sort. Now, that's a very predictive system. Now, what I would do as a result of having everything line up for me, having the ideal trade, everything is perfect, instead of using, let's say, 1% risk on that position, I'd use a little bit more, because that, after all, that's the perfect trade, right? But I never took into account that if that position lost, that I would be in major drawdown. And let's say I risk 3%. Oftentimes, it would be more than that. I think on average, if some of you, when you find some of those perfect trades, if you're not disciplined like I wasn't back then, you would risk maybe 15%, if not more, of your account on that one position. And that precisely is one of the reasons why predictive systems cause fragility. Because if you lose that trade when everything lined up for you in your favor, now you're in major drawdown. But let's look at the difference between a fragile system and an anti-fragile one. He mentions that when you want deviations and you don't care about the possible dispersion of outcomes that the future can bring, since most will be helpful, you are anti-fragile, which is exactly what I'm working on becoming now. You see, I don't care about whether or not the market goes up exactly at midnight up until London Open or something, or if it's a delayed protractionary phase. Either way, the outcomes that the future bring will most likely be helpful to me, because now I understand how to trade the London delayed protractionary phase or the regular London protractionary phase, where let's say I'll add in the central bank dealers range and start adding in my standard deviations to try to catch the high. Either way, I can possibly be profitable from it. Although sometimes the markets may not give me my ideal London protractionary phase or the delayed protractionary phase, which is important. He mentions here, since most will be helpful, not all, but most. Sometimes I won't get my regular London protractionary phase or the delayed protractionary phase, and I'm okay with that. I may take a loser, markets may just consolidate the whole time, or I may not trade at all. But either way, if I'm able to work within both sides of the markets, I become anti-fragile. But beforehand, it was completely one-sided. I could only trade the London session if I had my ideal London protractionary phase. Now, let's take a look at a chart, and we'll actually see what I did yesterday. And we'll actually take a look at this quote here. Nassim said this also. He mentions that compromising is condoning. And in his book, he mentioned that if you see fraud and you don't say fraud, you are a fraud. Quite extreme for him to say, but that's exactly who he is. Now, let's see how this applies to the trade I took yesterday. Now, this line is delineating the 2 a.m. London Open and 5 a.m. And prior to this price action, exactly at midnight, price started to trade lower. And I'm bearish on EU, like you all know. So this was the London delayed protractionary phase. Now, some of you may hate me for this, but I failed to recognize this in the moment. I simply failed to recognize this. Because remember, guys, I've only understood the delayed protractionary phase for a couple weeks now, not even a month. And right now I'm working on incorporating it into my own trading. So there will be some flaws, and although I recognize it in GU, yesterday's London session, I failed to recognize this last night. Well, I recognized it 2 days before, and last night I failed to see it. And now in hindsight, it looks so clear. Because remember, ICT mentions that you want to see the market rally right at 2 a.m. London, or exactly after it, or sometime after it. And we see that exact phenomenon. Price has been trading lower since midnight. It hasn't done our regular London protractionary stage, but it's been trading lower. And we know at 2 a.m. or after it to anticipate that exact protractionary stage. So anticipating that the markets will rally and go higher. And this happens here. But yet, I'm so not familiar with trading the delayed protractionary stage, I completely missed it. Although ideally, you'd think I'd be mad at myself, and maybe I am. I maybe hiding it, but I don't necessarily feel mad or upset. So seeing this rally in here, this low itself had taken out previous low in here. And because we've only seen sell side, I was anticipating higher prices. So what did I do? I entered long in here, I believe. Yeah, somewhere in here. Stop loss in here. And I was expecting prices to take out this high. I think I entered in here. So I wanted prices to take out this high and all these because I'm still bearish, but I want to see buy side taken first. It's one of the flaws. I'm so used to trading the regular London protractionary phase that the delayed one is just off for me. Now, I entered here, and of course, I had some drawdown, and I was just scared out of my pants. I was like, come on, man. Really? And of course, price traded higher, and for a minute, I thought I was in the clear. Although I did notice this fair value gap, and I was questioning myself, well, will price really use this fair value gap to head lower? Well, why would it go lower? I didn't understand that this was the delayed protraction that was happening in here. I simply didn't see it. And I only saw it later on in New Year's session as I reflected on my losses. I was like, well, what did I do wrong exactly? I'm not getting it. What did I do wrong? And only then did I realize, oh, that's what happened. London delayed protraction got me again. It's not the first time. I do hope it's the last, but I won't hold my breath. I understand that with every mistake and every loser, it is going to benefit the whole. Because I have these screenshots and I have all this pain. And pain is information. Trust me, these are mistakes that will be very valuable to me. I may make them now or maybe in the future. And for that, it's unfortunate to my future self if you fall victim to this again. But eventually, when I have this delayed London protraction set up, completely mastered, man, that'll be a good day. And I hope you guys stick around to see the process. Now, this stopped me out. And right when it did, I changed my bias. I didn't change my bias because I realized it was a delayed protraction in London, but it was for something else. And it's something I won't be mentioning here. Maybe holding back some stuff, guys, but I hope you all can understand. And seeing this, I changed my bias. And I decided that, okay, the markets are bearish and it's likely not going to head any higher here. I was wrong to think that buy side will still be taken. So I decided to put a sell limit in here and went short inside this fair value gap. Now, if you remember from the mind map, it says that compromising is condoning. And one of my rules in my trading is to never sell below New York Midnight's open. It has to be above it, just to make sure I'm getting some kind of a premium. I'm selling into some kind of a premium. But I dismissed that. I compromised that rule because I had complete faith that this thing would head lower and I would have passed my phase 1 FTMO challenge. So I compromised. And I understood the risk. And I remember I was journaling beforehand thinking to myself, well, this could either go very well for me, and even though I compromise one of my rules, it'll serve me if I get the right trade, and if it goes my way, I'll just pass the challenge and go to sleep, or I'll probably regret it moments from now. I wrote the exact thing I just mentioned here. And let's take a look. Sold in here. I placed my stop loss at the top of this wick. And we have the bearish order block in here. My understanding of price action, I was willing to let price trade even at the midpoint, mean threshold of this order block. So for safe measures, I put my stop loss in here. Exactly about 10 pips, which most of my trades are about 10 pips or less. With the understanding also that price already traded inside this fair value gap. So really there's really no reason for price to even go any higher than that, right? But as you can expect, price does the unexpected. It does. It takes me out, I think, by about 2 to 3 pips, and then trades lower. I think up until now, maybe even 70 pips lower. And right about here, I think about 30 pips was all I needed to actually pass the phase 1 challenge. But yet, it stopped me out before heading lower. Now, I have 2 losses here. Although yesterday or the day before that, I had a couple winners. So I guess those 2 trades wiped out my winners from the day before. But this trade, I was wrong, and I admit that. And this trade, just odd. It's just one of those trades. I'm not even sure how I'm supposed to deal with it. I'm not angry. I'm not frustrated. I really laugh. It's like, well, why did the markets even need to go higher here? It really makes no sense to me. I really don't know what to tell you guys about this trade. I'm okay with it, I suppose. It's one of those trades. Like, there had been no reason for it to go up in here. Really none. And it did, so it's not like it actually took out buy side or anything. It just took me out. So I do feel like this this one was personal. But I'm indifferent to the results. Now let's go back to our mind map. Let me show you guys some of those trades. That's the first trade. That's the buy I took. And that's the sell. And you guys can see it right here. A buy and a sell. Do I regret some of those trades? Not really. No, not really. Now, let's actually take a look at my FTMO dashboard. I know some of you guys may be curious about this, so let's do it. Now, here it is. A clean chart if I've ever seen one. As you can see, I was this close to reaching the profit target yesterday or the day before. I apologize. Minimum trading, a days, maximum, everything is in check. And because of the 2 losses I've had now, I need about 3.5% to pass. Now here's the kicker. I only have about 2 days. So tonight's trading and tomorrow's trading are about all the time I have. So I really need to make something happen here to get this done. Now, I do hope you guys are so far enjoying today's video. Now, to finish up today's video, let's take a look at an auto suggestion. I say to myself, isn't it wonderful? I understand that every losing trade is simply a transactional cost for the well-being of the whole. In my journey towards mastery, pain is information, and every losing trade will be more helpful than harmful. Hence, I will become anti-fragile as a result. Losers are nothing to fear, for they are necessary sacrifices for the well-being of the whole. Now, affirmations like these help me a lot, because oftentimes having some of those idiotic losers like this one where market simply does something irrational in my opinion and takes me out. It's easy for me to be upset, especially with what's on the line. And this trade itself, had the markets not done that, I would have just had passed my phase 1 FTMO challenge. But because it did so, now I'm one step further to passing when I could have just passed it already. Now, as a Stoic, I understand that it is my duty to remain indifferent to those results. After all, whether I pass it in time before Friday or I don't, I'll just simply retry. No biggie. Mistakes like these will probably keep on repeating as long as I'll probably be trading. So I'm okay with it. And I understand that if I'm anti-fragile, those losers are nothing for me to fear because they are simply necessary sacrifices for the well-being of my trading. And I hope you guys understand this too. Some of you may have some of the same problems, have some trades that you lose and simply don't make sense, but don't fear them, don't dread them, don't hate yourself for it. Just simply understand that it's a transactional cost. And if you guys remember, my first video on the channel was about the principle of mastery. And towards our goal, when it comes to achieving mastery, deliberate practice, which we talked about in that specific video, is very important because you guys wake up and you turn on your charts and you do so without no one forcing you. There's no gun to your head, but you do so because you deliberately want to practice and get better in these markets. And if you deliberately understand and welcome some of your losing trades, you'll be way better off than hating them or feeling down or hating yourself for the matter for these losing trades. Because Although I've lost 2 trades, which are completely my fault, it's no one else's, and I hold myself accountable to them. But I don't hate myself for it. I don't hate losing the positions. It's simply part of trading. So let's take a look again at the auto suggestion. It says, "Isn't it wonderful? I understand that every losing trade is simply a transactional cost for the well being of the whole. In my journey towards mastery, pain is information. Every loser helps me better understand price action. And every losing trade will be more helpful than harmful, although it may seem otherwise. Right, when you lose a trade, it may be painful. You may ask yourself, how can this possibly be helpful to me? But understand that when it comes to becoming anti-fragile, losers are information. And if you collect them and if you journal them, all these sacrifices will benefit the whole in the long run. So, with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed today's mind map, and I hope you have a good time trading and understand that you don't have to fear your losers, but instead welcome them and be indifferent to the results, whether you have a winning trade or a losing trade. It simply gets you one step closer towards mastery. And I do hope you guys wish me luck for my trading. Have 2 days attempt to get this challenge done. I spent, I think, about 2 weeks. Price action wasn't so good, so spent 2 weeks not even trading at all. So I'm a bit behind. I wish I had more time to actually trade, but I think I can get it done tonight. So with that being said, have a good trading and, of course, a wonderful rest of your day.